Hello everyone and welcome back. Today's video is going to be a bit different from the videos that I usually upload. That's because I like making more videos that are like true creepy historic events and needs a lot of research first. But anyway, today I'm going to talk about the 5 cases of vampires who really existed. I have to stop there and say a few things about vampires. So, we all have seen movies with vampires and most of us love them, me included. In the movies, vampires are undead humans who are drinking blood, turning themselves into bats and hate sunlight, garlic and silver. Because these are the 3 things that can kill them, right? So, when I say vampires, I mean the community of people who have a specific lifestyle. In most cases, they are cut out from the society and like to drink blood from humans or animals. They don't fly and they aren't dead. Now that I'm clear with that, I'm going to talk about the reason I made this video and why I believe that vampires exist and have existed for hundreds of years. So what caught my attention was an article in Discover magazine written by John Edgar Browning with the title "Real-Life Vampires Exist and Researchers Are Studying Them." The author spent 5 years conducting ethnographic studies of the real vampires living in New Orleans and Buffalo. He says, "They're not easy to find, but when you do track them down, they can be quite friendly." He continues with the article and writes, "It may sound unbelievable, but there are actual vampire communities all over the world. The real vampire community, like the legendary figure it emulates, knows few national boundaries from Russia and South Africa to England and the United States. He describes them as real, but not in the sense that they turn into bats and live forever, but many do sport, and they need blood, human or animal, or psychic energy from donors in order to feel healthy. They aren't violent, blood-sucking ghouls or evil entities, but rather people who feel they're most alive and healthiest when they consume blood. Human blood is best, and they only feed from willing donors who have had testing from a doctor. There are also psychic vampires who, rather than feeding on blood, consume the energy of another person, again, a willing donor, or of the universe at large. They aren't looking to be found, since they believe that people will misunderstand them, their way of living, and their needs. That's why they like to live all together in organized communities and gather all together to do charity events. Some resemblance of the real vampire community has existed since at least the early to mid-1970s. And here is another myth that we have seen in movies. When a vampire bites a human and drinks their blood, the poor human being becomes a vampire too. But not in the case of real vampires. Their self-described nature begins to manifest around or just after puberty. According to them, it derives from the lack of subtle energies their bodies produce, energies other people take for granted. It's a condition they claim to be unable to change, so they embrace it. From the things that I've read, I concluded that these people aren't the stuff of nightmares. They are far from it actually. But as always, there are some exceptions. Since real vampires are walking the earth for hundreds of years, not all of them have been nice. These are 5 horrific cases of real vampires. Auguste Delagrange. In 1912, the US state of Louisiana was gripped by fear after a bizarre spate of murders. The victims were all found dismembered in their own home, but there was little to no blood present at the scene. After police efforts to catch the murderer, rumors began circulating that the culprit may actually be a vampire. After several more bodies were discovered, the locals pleaded with Father Henry Jante, a local Catholic priest, for help. Jante met a local voodoo priest by the name of Moses Amashad, and together they decided to hunt the vampire. The two holy men set about mapping the crimes. They discovered that the murder seemed to follow the train line, leading them to believe that the person they were looking for might be employee by the railway. They began to monitor one particular station when they spotted a man neither had ever seen before. He was ghostly pale and appeared to have blood smeared on his clothing. Here's where the report gets even stranger. In an effort to learn the man's identity, it was said that the priests hunted down and destroyed several minions who confirmed that the man, Auguste Delagrange, was indeed the head vampire they were looking for. The next night, the two men made their way to an isolated shack. Delagrange was sleeping inside, presumed weak from lack of feeding. Jante took a wooden stake and drove it straight into the heart of the beast. Jante claims that Delagrange didn't make a sound, only opened his eyes wide and stared into the face of the priest before fading into hell. Auguste Delagrange was believed to have murdered more than 40 people before he was staked by the priest. Today, his skeleton can be seen on display at the Vampire Museum, located on the outskirts of the French Quarter in New Orleans. The above photo is of a small wooden box was said to contain the vampire's heart, along with a wooden stake that killed him. Arnold Paole. In 1726, a man named Arnold Paole was reported to have become a vampire in the small Serbian town of Meduena. According to reports compiled by several Austrian military doctors who were sent to investigate the case, Paole was said to have become a vampire after falling to his death from a hay wagon. The villagers said that Paole had often claimed that he had been plagued by a vampire in his former homeland, but that he believed he had cured himself by eating soil from the vampire's grave. Shortly after Paole's death, members of the village began claiming to have been attacked by him. In each case, the witnesses mysteriously died just days later. When the local military heard of what was happening, they advised the villagers to open the suspected vampire's grave and examine the corpse. Despite being dead for 40 years, Paole's body was still intact, and his veins contained fluid blood. His hair and beard had continued to grow, and there was fresh blood in his mouth and on his shirt. The villagers concluded that Paole was indeed a vampire and drove a stake into his heart. As they did so, he was said to have let out a frightful shriek, groaning and bleeding. The villagers burned the body, then staked and burned the bodies of his 4 victims as well. About 5 years later, another spate of mysterious deaths began to plague the area. The locals believed that the first to die, a woman named Malaysia, was to blame, as she had once mentioned that she had eaten 2 sheep that had been killed by vampires. It was though that those sheep were killed by the original vampire, Arnold Paole. Locals began reporting that the deceased were attacking them in the middle of the night. One girl by the name Stanoshka claimed she had been strangled in her sleep by a boy that had died 9 weeks prior. She passed away just 3 days later. Households gathered together in the evenings, some members standing watch while others slept. The locals complained to the military, who sent an infectious disease specialist named Glaser to investigate. He found out that many of the deceased showed no signs of decomposition, and some even had fresh blood in their mouths. He compiled a report recommending that the authorities should pacify the population by fulfilling its request to execute the vampires. Shortly after, a second commission consisting of 3 military surgeons, as well as several other military officers, were sent to investigate. They too found that several of the older bodies had not decayed, and that their chests and other organs were filled with fresh blood. The surgeons summarized their findings by stating that the bodies were indeed in vampiric condition. The suspected vampires had their heads cut off and their bodies burned. The others were reburied in their graves. The amazing thing about this case is that it was reported by so many experts. The disease specialist, Glaser, even sent the details of his findings to his father, also a doctor and a correspondent of a prominent Nuremberg journal. He wrote a letter to the journal detailing the case, and the reports of both Glaser and him were reprinted in several articles. Could this small Serbian town have actually been plagued by vampires? Or did all these experts somehow get the reports wrong? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. The Highgate Vampire. This photo, taken sometime between the late 1960s and early 1970s, was captured in the Highgate Cemetery in London. The dark-robed figure in the center is believed by many to be a king vampire of the undead, said to have been a Romanian nobleman, brought to London by his devoted followers. In 1970, sightings of the vampire grew. On Friday, March 13th, 2 men, Sean Manchester and David Farrant, vowed to find and destroy the evil creature. The media reported the story, and within 2 hours, a mob of hunters from all over London began swarming over the locked gates of the cemetery. Manchester claimed that he had led a group to one particular catacomb, where they managed to climb inside through a hole in the roof. He said that they opened several coffins and placed garlic and holy water inside. Some months later, the charred and headless corpse of a woman was found near the catacomb that Manchester said he had entered. Farron was arrested soon after in the churchyard next to Highgate Cemetery, carrying a crucifix and a wooden stake. Shortly after Farron was arrested, Manchester and his group returned to the cemetery. This time, they forced open the doors to another family vault, where they believed the coffin of the vampire had been moved to. Just as Manchester was about to stake the body inside, he was persuaded to leave the vault by several members of the group. 3 years later, Manchester claimed he again encountered the same corpse. This time, it was in the cellar of an abandoned house in the Highgate area. Believing that it had to be the vampire he was searching for, he staked and burned the body. While mysterious sightings are still reported at the Highgate Cemetery to this day, no one knows for sure if the king vampire of the undead still lurks within the grounds. Was the cemetery actually a home to a real vampire? Was the beast destroyed, or could it still lie, waiting in a sinister slumber, soon to awake and take its next victim? Richard Trenton Chase, also known as the Vampire Killer of Sacramento, afflicted with numerous mental problems but never properly treated, and a drug and alcohol addict, Richard Trenton Chase began killing and drinking the blood of animals at a young age. In 1976, he was hospitalized for blood poisoning after injecting himself with the blood from a rabbit he killed. Many patients and nurses were frightened by him and referred to him as Dracula. He was frequently found with blood smeared on his face, which he claimed was from cutting himself shaving. However, he was actually biting the heads of birds and sucking their blood. A year later, Chase was found in a field near Lake Tahoe, Nevada. He was naked and covered in cow's blood. The incident was reported, but nothing else was done. Only a few short months later, Chase shot and killed Ambrose Griffin. He would go on to kill 6 people between 1977 and 1978. His next victim, Terry Wallin, was a 22-year-old pregnant wife of David Wallin. She was found by her husband when he arrived home from work, disemboweled and drained of her blood. It appeared that Chase had collected her blood into a yogurt cup to drink it. He would only enter homes with unlocked doors, believing that an unlocked door was an open invitation to enter. Chase drank the blood of his victims, as well as cannibalized their corpses. He was eventually arrested and sentenced to death in 1979. However, in 1980, Chase managed to save up enough of his antidepressant pills and committed suicide via overdose in his prison cell. Bizarre cult drinks blood of hit-and-run victims. In a small village in Zimbabwe, there occurred a rather bizarre incident in February 2013. Following a hit-and-run accident that killed 4 children, a group of people in black robes reportedly converged at the scene and feasted on the blood of the victims. Numerous people witnessed the group in action moments after the accident. Believing the people to be involved in some kind of cult, possibly Satanist in origin, the villagers brought in a man named Banda, who was a witch hunter, to sniff them out. Banda was successful, and after giving the cultists a chance to turn themselves in, he named their names before the village and turned them over to the police chief. Following this, the home of the cult members were raided, which was said to contain baboons and other weird animals which had never before been seen by the villagers. So these are the most extreme cases of real vampires, and as you can understand from the cases, these people had mental issues, or perhaps they were acting like animals, killing people and drinking their blood, something that the organized vampire communities forbid. The bottom line: many real vampires hope to spread more awareness about their way of life, so that it can become easier for them to take a step outside of their nutshell and be more active and free in the real world. I hope you liked today's video. Let me know in the comment section below if you like these types of videos and if you have any ideas for future videos, and I will see you soon in the next one. Until then, take care and have a wonderful night.